Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about who's in charge of your relationship. Okay, I'm going to start out with giving you a little story about myself. And way back before actually I got married to my firefighter. And then we're going to talk a little bit about who is really in charge in your relationship, and is it who you want to have be in charge? But before we get started in that, I wanted to make sure to tell you guys about something special there is over on the website for you. If you go over to relationshipsonfire.com, so relationships with an S, on fire, it's all one word, .com, there is a free course that I put in there for you. And it's really great. It will pair up really well with this particular episode because in it, I tell you about the 4 things that researchers have found in relationships that lead to unsuccessful relationships, lead to divorce or separation or high level of dissatisfaction. But I don't leave you with the negative. I give you the positive too. What are the 7 things that research finds that really builds up relationships and really brings people together and are the hallmarks of positive relationships? And then I give you a little exercise, what you can do to build that up in a daily practice in a really simple, easy way. So go over and grab that. Because like I said, it's going to match perfectly with this podcast today. Because once you know who's in charge of your relationship, you're going to want to look for and see, gosh, is the person in charge doing those 4 things that really tear apart relationships? Or is it doing those 7 things that build it up? So go on over to relationshipsonfire.com and I give you the whole spiel right there. It's a quick little course, and but it's really powerful information to have to really put you in the driver's seat of what you want in your relationship. All right, now for a little story. I wanted to tell you about this little story. So before we got married, we were trying to decide what to do with our name. And I don't know if you know, but my last name is Myka, and it's spelled in a really weird sort of way. Not how you would traditionally see Myka as a first name being spelled. And the reason why is because we made it up. It's a totally made up name. And we both changed our names to Myka after we got married. We decided we didn't want to hyphenate. We didn't want to do 2 names. We didn't want to have different last names. We wanted our kids to have the same name. And so we made up a new name. And the name came from, we didn't just make it up out of this blue, but it came from the first 2 letters of my spouse's last name and the last 2 letters of my last name, our previous last names before we were married. It was the perfect hybrid of the 2 of us. And, this took lots of conversations and kind of mulling over and seeing how we felt about it and if it seemed right and kind of trying it on and talking to people. And my father-in-law sat us down one day and wanted to have a conversation. And he wanted to talk about this, which was fine, of course. It's very not traditional. And so, of course, we wanted to have a loving, respectful conversation with him. And he said, it's not about control, but it's just, he didn't like it at the end of the day. And we kind of went back and forth and around it. And finally, he got really frustrated and he said, well, who's going to wear the pants in the family? And then at which point my then fiance said, okay, Dad, I think we're done. I think you've made your point, and that isn't the kind of relationship that we have. So, which I wanted to bring that story because it's a perfect story when you might think about the idea of who's in charge, who's in control in your relationship. Your brain might go over to those sort of traditional value ways of who's head of household. And maybe even particularly because our spouses work in very hierarchical jobs, right? There's captains and battalion chiefs and lieutenants, and there's a very structured hierarchy of command, which in many regards is very useful and super important, right? You need to have somebody who has an outside view telling people where to go and what to do, and people being able to listen and follow instructions. It's a big piece that helps keep our firefighters safe at work when they're in those really high stress, high go situations. That this hierarchy really helps keep them organized, and it's really important in that context. But maybe it's not necessarily how you do your marriage, or not that's really none of my business. However you want to do it in your relationship is totally fine. For us, we're much more egalitarian. We don't have one person that really dominates over the other one. We probably have our, particular areas that one person feels more passionately about and takes more leads in certain areas. But I wouldn't say that one of us controls the other one. So when I talk about who's in charge of your relationship, the thing that you as an individual, me as an individual, what you can control is yourself. And so we really want to first see who's in charge of you. And because there is within each person, we have lots of different thoughts. And I like to think of, perhaps you've heard this phrase before, the itty bitty shitty committee in your head. Sorry if anybody has little people in the car there listening. But the committee, I like to think of my brain, of my thought, as a whole committee room of voices, or maybe even people, and I don't mean it in a I'm going nuts sort of way, but we have different ways that we think about things, right? And we have different voices in our head. And who is the one that is calling the shots in your own head, that is driving you into your relationship? This is the place that I think is really useful for us to look at and to see which one of those committee members is doing what. Let me explain that a little bit more. So around my committee table, and I really vision it like that. Like I'm in an office, I've got one of those offices that has clear, windows. It's in a high-rise building, windows looking out over some city, and a clear office wall. And you got that big table in the middle and the whiteboard at the front. And, this is the committee of Cori. And around that table, I've got little Patty is one of my committee members. And Patty, she's like 3 years old. And the place that Patty comes up is like the temper tantrumy part of me, right? I like see Patty, I think of her very much like when you ever go through the grocery store line and there's some 3-year-old who's like, I want a candy. Can I have a piece of candy? And the parent says, no. I want a candy. No, we're not having a piece of candy, right? And then she's just like, I envision little Patty with her little pigtails screaming and like laying on the grocery store floor, throwing a complete temper tantrum of wanting candy, right? Sometimes Patty is in charge of that whole committee in my relationship, that I show up throwing a temper tantrum like 3-year-old little Patty. I let her be in charge sometimes. Doesn't usually, 3-year-olds aren't meant to be in charge. But it's good for me to really see when I name it and I know it. I'm like, oh, right. How would I then treat little Patty? How would I treat a little 3-year-old self? I mean, I've had a 3-year-old in the grocery store line, and it's not really useful for me to like start yelling about that she's not going to get the candy bar or whatever. When I'm my best parent self, I just keep saying no because it's not time for the candy bar. I'm not going to give in to that. And say, yep, I hear that you're upset about it. And we're going to keep moving on. And you're going to be okay. And the world isn't actually coming to an end because you're not getting what you want right now. So that's one of the people who shows up. The other one I was thinking about the other day is there's like a teenage, and then we've got Broody Barbara. Sorry if this is anybody's names out there. It's helpful for me when I really stop and see who's on the committee. And the more clear I get, the better I have a relationship with them. And I can decide, do I want Pigtail Patty or Brooding Barbara to be in charge? Brooding Barbara is like a teenager that's just like kind of sulky and mopey and just doesn't want to be happy and like wants to be oppositional and kind of defiant. And even though nothing really is going wrong, but sometimes I'm kind of in that, like, yeah, broody Barbara gets in charge, and I have teens in my house. So I know that broody, that broody person. And sometimes that's me. And sometimes broody Barbara is in charge of my relationship, that I'm showing up and letting her be the head of the committee. And I'm speaking to my partner from that place, and I'm viewing what my partner's doing in our relationship from that place. Is that really who I want to have in charge? Another one I have, go on the other side, maybe one that feels a little bit more positive, mothering Martha, right? There are times that I am very nurturing and I'm very caring, and I'm letting mothering Martha come in and take care gently of myself and my partner and my family, showing up in service in that kind of mothering way. But mothers can also get a little over the top sometimes, right? And they feel like they always have to be taking care of things, and other people can't take care of themselves, and it can be a little bit stifling. So I do have to watch that, mothering Martha is really just showing up in service and not as a way to feel okay in the world, to feel like she only has value if she is giving and being of service, but that she actually has value just showing up and being present and being a member of the family. So there's lots of different yous who can sit around your committee table. Take time and really think about it in this way, because one of the things that we want to do in our relationships, especially if you're wanting to make a change in it, that you're wanting to feel more positive in it, you're wanting to grow some love and connection in it, you're wanting to really just take that 10,000 foot view and see what's happening. Who is in charge of how you show up to your relationship? And before you try and be, the person that you think you're supposed to be, you want to first start out and see, well, who am I? Who is the one that is showing up? Of course, it's going to be different committee members at different times. And if you're like me, sometimes I really bounce around quite a bit, quite quickly, and between these different committee members. But the more you get to know them and kind of see them as individual parts of you and really fill them out as characters like I have, you can develop a relationship with these different parts of yourself in your head. So they don't just randomly bully in and take charge, right? Like that Pigtail Patty, right? She can really just like come in like a ball of fire and take charge and just start throwing a temper tantrum and throwing stuff around, literally or figuratively, right? Screaming, being out of control. This isn't the way we want to show up with our best self, but you want to show up first with this kindness and love and compassion that Patty's upset about something. And maybe it's something that, could be that she could have, right? At another time. Like we can make a plan for a candy bar over the weekend or whatever it is, right? We don't need to do it on impulse, but we could make a plan for it. Or we just need to soothe that part of ourselves and say, yep, I know you're upset. I know it's disappointing when you don't get the things that you want. I know it's hard to wait for things, right? And to be kind and loving and soothing to that part of yourself. It's not about seeing who's at the committee table and booting them off. It's how do we integrate them together? How do we show love to each part of ourselves that shows up in our relationships so that when we are relating to our partner, when we are thinking about them, when we are figuring out why the trash and the dishes didn't get done, or why we haven't gone on a date in a very long time, or when I go on a date, why brooding Barb just shows up on the whole date. And even though technically we're on a date, it's not very fun because I've let brooding Barbara take charge. So get to know, think about who is on your committee. Who are the different parts of yourself that show up? See their characteristics. Give them love and compassion and see what they really want. What is it they are trying to get? What need are they trying to have met? And then give it some space to see, is this something that I can meet with you? Is there a compromise here? Or is it just something that, 3-year-olds throw temper tantrums when they don't get the candy that they want right now, and life just has to move on and it's okay. Have compassion, have love for each of these committee members. All right, be committed. Be committed to yourself, all of you, all of the relationship you have with yourself and with your partner. Be present. Being in relationship with these different committee members is a way to be present, is to slow down and to ground yourself. Show up with curiosity and love for yourself and your spouse. And I'll see you next week. If not before, I will see you in the freebie course. Pop on over, relationshipsonfire.com. Thanks for listening, and make sure you subscribe and like and all those things so that catch up with you next week. Bye. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you can get every episode. And when you are ready to be in action, come find us. Facebook, Instagram, or our website. It's all the same name, relationshipsonfire.com. We've got that S on there. There's lots of us having relationships. So relationships with an S on fire.com. Thanks so much. Saying goodbye, your fire and water gal, Cori Myka. See you next time.